The Book of Exodus. Introduction. Exodus continues the account which was begun in Genesis, although there was a lapse of at least 3.5 centuries. Genesis 15:13 says that the seed of Abraham would spend 400 years in Egypt. Exodus 12:40 says that it was 430 years, and Galatians 3:16-17 confirms it. It was 430 years from the call of Abraham, and 400 years from the time that God told Abraham. Exodus means the way out and tells the story of redemption by blood and by power. The message of Exodus is stated in Hebrews 11:23-29, which says, "By faith Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months of his parents, because they saw he was a proper child, and they were not afraid of the king's commandment. By faith Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God, than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he had respect unto the recompense of the reward. By faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured, as seeing him who is invisible. Through faith he kept the Passover, and the sprinkling of blood, lest he that destroyed the firstborn should touch them. By faith they passed through the Red Sea as by dry land, which the Egyptians essaying to do were drowned." The word which opens Exodus is a conjunction that is better translated, and, rather than, now. Exodus has been called the sequel to Genesis. Dr. G. Campbell Morgan wrote, "In the book of Exodus nothing is commenced, nothing is finished." Genesis 46:27 tells us that 70 souls of Jacob entered Egypt. It is conservatively estimated that 2,100,000 left Egypt at the time of the Exodus. Although it is impossible to be certain about dates in this early period, it would seem that Joseph entered Egypt under the Hyksos or shepherd kings who were Semitic conquerors, and were related to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Actually, the Israelites may have been their only friends, as they were hated by Egyptians. Finally, they were driven out by a native Egyptian dynasty which was understandably hostile to foreigners. In this line was the Pharaoh of the oppression and the one who knew not Joseph. Moses figures prominently in the book of Exodus. He is the author of the Pentateuch, which includes the first 5 books of the Old Testament: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. In the book of Exodus, Moses' life is divided into 3 40-year periods. 1. 40 years in Pharaoh's palace in Egypt. 2. 40 years in the desert in Midian. 3. 40 years in the wilderness as leader of Israel. Moses' training in Egypt, evidently in the temple of the sun, did not prepare him to follow God in leading Israel out of Egypt. God trained him in the desert for 40 years to reveal to him that he could not deliver Israel alone. God gave Moses a BD, backside of the desert, degree. It should be noted that after God prepared Moses to deliver his people, he sent him back to Egypt after 40 years. Moses is to assemble elders of Israel and go to Pharaoh. Pharaoh will refuse to let Israel go. His refusal will open the contest between God and the gods of Egypt. Egypt was dominated by idolatry, gods many and lords many. There were thousands of temples and millions of idols. Behind idolatry was Satan. There was power in the religion of Egypt. Now as Jannes and Jambres withstood Moses, so do these also resist the truth, men of corrupt minds, reprobate concerning the faith. 2 Timothy 3:8. Pharaoh asked, "Who is the Lord, that I should obey his voice to let Israel go? I know not the Lord, neither will I let Israel go." Exodus 5:2. God introduced himself. Pharaoh got acquainted with God and acknowledged him as God. "And Pharaoh sent, and called for Moses and Aaron, and said unto them, I have sinned this time, the Lord is righteous, and I and my people are wicked." Exodus 9:27. Then Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron in haste, and he said, "I have sinned against the Lord your God, and against you." Exodus 10:16. A question arises from this episode: why the plagues? They were God's battle with the gods of Egypt. Each plague was directed against a particular god in Egypt. "For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord." Exodus 12:12. God wanted to reveal to his own people that he, the Lord, was far greater than any god of Egypt and that he had power to deliver them. Outline. 1. A deliverer, chapters 1-11. A. Slavery of Israel in Egypt, chapter 1. B. Birth of Moses, First 40 years in Pharaoh's palace, chapter 2. C. Call of Moses, second 40 years in Midian, chapter 3, Incident of burning bush. D. Return of Moses to Egypt, announcement of deliverance to Israel, chapter 4. E. Contest with Pharaoh, chapters 5 to 11, 9 plagues against idolatry of Egypt, battle of the gods. 2. Deliverance, by blood and power, chapters 12 to 14. A. Institution of Passover, 10th plague, death of firstborn, blood, chapter 12. B. Crossing Red Sea, destruction of army of Egypt, power, chapters 13 to 14. 3. Marching to Mount Sinai, spiritual education, chapters 15 to 18. 7 experiences correspond to Christian experience. A. Song of Redeemed, Wilderness of Shur, chapter 15, verses 1 to 22, no bed of roses after redemption. B. Mara, bitter water sweetened by tree, chapter 15, verses 23 to 26, cross sweetens bitter experiences of life. C. Elam, fruitful Christian experience, chapter 15:27. D. Wilderness of sin, manna and quail, chapter 16, Christ is the bread of life. E. Smitten rock, that rock was Christ, chapter 17, verses 1 to 7. F. Amalek, the flesh, chapter 17 verses 8 to 16, victory on the hilltop, Deuteronomy 25:17 to 18. G. Jethro, priest of Midian, chapter 18, worldly wisdom in contrast to revelation. 4. The law, condemnation, chapters 19 to 24. A. Arrival at Mount Sinai, agreement to accept the law, chapter 19. B. 10 Commandments, order for the altar, chapter 20. C. Social legislation, chapters 21 to 24. 5. Blueprint and construction of tabernacle, chapters 25 to 40, a pattern and picture of Christ. A. Blueprint for tabernacle, pattern of garments for high priest, chapters 25 to 30. B. Workman for tabernacle, Sabbath assigned to Israel, chapter 31. C. Golden calf, broken law, Moses' intercession, second tables of the law, chapters 32 to 35. D. Construction of tabernacle, chapters 36 to 39. E. Tabernacle erected, filled with glory of the Lord, chapter 40, Exodus begins in gloom and ends in glory.